Welcome to this explainer. True social change doesn't just happen by accident, right? It actually requires a massive living mechanism. So today, we're going to walk through a dynamic visual analysis of what we can basically call an ecosystem of change. We're going to explore how massive, macro-level bureaucratic state frameworks seamlessly blend all the way down into micro-level grassroots community actions. By using this ecosystem metaphor, it's like a giant puzzle coming together, and we'll see exactly how policies on paper are transformed into real human impact. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The social protection system, 2. Public health actors, 3. University social responsibility, 4. The learning service model, 5. Participatory action research, and finally, 6. Phases of social cartography. Let's get started. Starting things off with Section 1, the social protection system. Before we get into the policy weeds, I want you to really think about this for a second. What actually is social protection? We usually just default to picturing hospitals, doctors, and clinics. But I want to challenge you to rethink your definition of health and social well-being entirely, because it goes way beyond the four walls of a hospital. To properly understand this, we're going to frame our starting point at the highest level of government policy, untangling the Colombian health system specifically, by looking at the landscape following the major reforms of 1993, which is known as Law 100. Well, according to the World Health Organization, a social protection system is defined as interventions in society that have the primary purpose of promoting health and social well-being. This includes protecting folks from unrecoverable incapacity. And here's the thing, it is a vast, interdependent ecosystem. It involves the state, obviously, but here's a really surprising fact. It equally relies on private markets acting as equal players alongside civil society and the public non-state sector. They all have to work together to act on the general determinants of health. Now, here's an absolutely crucial distinction we need to make. The difference between the health system and the health sector. It sounds similar, right? But the health system is the broader umbrella. It includes private, public, and state care. It's society as a whole producing well-being. The health sector, however, is much narrower. It refers to the formally constituted organizations, things like basic environmental sanitation, pharmaceutical producers, and health insurers. Pre-1993, Colombia had a highly segmented system. The reform aimed to separate these administrative functions while actually integrating the population horizontally. Moving right along to Section 2, Public Health Actors. So now that we understand the system, let's transition to the specific actors who actually keep this macro-level ecosystem alive and functioning. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the decentralization of the Colombian system. Powers are separated horizontally, yet they are deeply integrated to cover the entire population. You've got the Ministry of Social Protection acting as the rector, setting policies and articulating the system. Then the departments manage mid to high complexity care and oversee local networks. Below them, municipalities handle local planning, direct primary care for the uninsured, and manage local health funds. And finally, the insurers manage affiliation, risk diagnosis, and guarantee the delivery of care. So everyone has a specific, decentralized lane, but they're all driving toward the exact same goal: social efficacy and population well-being. Which brings us to Section 3, University Social Responsibility. All right, so this brings us to a really fascinating transition. We've got this massive, complex health and social protection network, but who builds the human capital required to run it? Who actually trains the people that will eventually manage these municipalities and health departments? This is where we drop down to the meso level. To explore this, we're going to anchor ourselves geographically in Venezuela. Now, here is something truly striking. The Venezuelan Constitution establishes social responsibility as a supreme value. Because of this, they instituted the Law of Community Service for Higher Education Students, or LSCES. This is a strict legal mandate that literally obligates students to give back to society. So the university isn't just a place to get a degree anymore. It's legally recognized as the rector of the country's socio-educational development. 120. Just let that number sink in for a second. Under this law, this is the absolute minimum number of hours a Venezuelan university student must dedicate to community projects in order to graduate. And this happens after they've completed at least 50% of their academic load, ensuring they actually have the technical and scientific skills to offer their community. So what's the end game here? Well, the core objectives of this law totally transform students. It fosters solidarity, acts as reciprocity to a society that invested in their education, and integrates the university directly with the community. It forces students out of the role of passive learners, just sitting in lecture halls, and turns them into active problem solvers within their social ecosystem. It's all about forming vital social capital. Next up is Section 4, the learning service model. Let's look at the actual educational methodology that makes this legal requirement a reality. There's this great quote to consider: an education capable of collaborating with the population in the indispensable reflective organization of their thought. This methodology is deeply rooted in Latin American educational pioneers like Paulo Freire and Orlando Falsborda. They didn't see education as just, depositing facts into a student's brain. They viewed learning as a collaborative tool for community empowerment. The people themselves become a pedagogical principle. So, just to be clear, learning service is not your run-of-the-mill charity or volunteering. It is a highly structured pedagogical methodology. It connects the academic curriculum directly with real diagnosed community needs. It creates this mutually beneficial feedback loop. The students apply their scientific and humanistic knowledge to solve real problems, which improves the social reality, while the reality of the community drastically improves the quality and depth of the students' learning. It's a win-win. And that leads us into Section 5, Participatory Action Research. Now we're zooming all the way down to the micro level. We've talked about state policies and university frameworks, but exactly how do these students and communities execute tangible change together on the ground? Now, what's really interesting about participatory action research is how it entirely breaks the monopoly of traditional research. In traditional research, an outside expert usually comes in, extracts data from a community, and leaves. But in participatory action research, the community members themselves are the protagonists. They collect the data alongside the researchers, they analyze their own historical and social structures, and they act on their own problems to find solutions. It truly grants the community the right to the word, to decision, and to action. Finally, Section 6, Phases of Social Cartography. Within participatory action research, the absolute best hands-on tool for grassroots transformation is social cartography. A social cartography project happens in 8 phases. I'll guide you briskly through the first 4 here. First, you define the theme or problem. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, you identify the participants and integrate the researcher into the community. This isn't done from a distance. It involves visits, dialogue, and building real trust. Third, you plan the application, figuring out exactly what resources everyone brings to the table. And fourth, you apply the methodology to detect the true lived needs of the people. Let's move on and see how this builds in the second half. Once those needs are mapped, Phase 5 is where you analyze that data and set clear objectives. Phase 6 is launching the program, followed by Phase 7, which is execution, monitoring, and evaluation. Finally, Phase 8 is socialization and feedback. This reflection phase is so vital because it identifies new challenges and ensures the knowledge produced is shared back with everyone involved, leading to tangible social transformation. When we take a step back and look at the whole shebang, you really see how it all connects. The micro-level methodology of participatory action research and social cartography feeds directly back into the macro-level health and social protection systems we started with. It creates what the sources call a virtuous circle of education, research, and healthcare. The state sets the framework, the universities train the socially responsible human capital, and the communities, right alongside these students, map and solve their own local realities. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and honestly, it leaves us with a pretty vital question. You've seen how the ecosystem functions, all the way from bureaucratic ministries down to a student mapping a neighborhood's needs. We are all part of a larger system. So I'll leave you with this. What is your role in your community's social cartography? Are you just a passive observer, or are you an active participant in your living social ecosystem? Think about it. Keep learning.